Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ratnamala, working in MLR Institute of Technology in the Department of CSC. Today, we are going to see in detail what is database management system, what we are going to study in this course, and at the end of the course, what students will gain. Now, in this database management system, it is basically divided into 5 units. Now, coming to the first unit, we will be discussing about the database system applications. That is, what is actually the database, what is the history behind the database, what is the advantage of using the database over the file system, and we will be also discussing the data model. What is the data model? How many levels of data models are present? Different levels of abstraction, data independence, and structure of DBMS. These are nothing but these are the topics that will be understanding thoroughly what is the use of studying the database. So, it is termed as database system applications. After knowing the applications, we will be discussing about the introduction to database design. That is, who has designed the database, how actually the structure of database looks, what are the ER diagrams. We need to know some simple terms called entities, attributes, entity sets, relationships, and relationship sets. Now, entities, we will know the definition, and also you have a representation in an entity relationship diagram, how entities are represented, how attributes are represented, how entity sets are represented through different examples. And at the end of the unit, we will be able to know what is actually the ER diagram. A student will be able to learn how to draw an entity relationship diagram for a college management system, hospital management system, any system. When the student learns all this, he will be able to understand what is entity, what is attribute, what is entity set, and how you match a relationship between entities and attributes, and the students will be able to learn the complete ER model structure. This is about the first unit. So, it only concentrates on the introduction part and the major terminology which the students need to know at the entry level of the database management system. Now, the second unit is nothing but introduction to relational model. Now, in the first unit, we will be studying about the entities, relationships, how to match an entity with an attribute, and what are the relationships that we are going to know. After that, the next concept is nothing but introduction to relational model. Whenever we are studying the introduction to relational model, we have different types of constraints. Okay, this when we discuss in detail the second unit, we will be understanding what is the meaning of the constraint. Here overview, I am just telling that in this unit we will be studying about the integrity constraints and how we apply relations over the integrity constraints and how we are enforcing the integrity constraint. That is, in a table, how you assign a primary key, how you assign a foreign key, and how you are using the query relational database. So, integrity constraints are nothing but we need to know the keys that are available or that we study in the database management system. We have different types of keys like primary key, foreign key, candidate key, super key. These all keys are nothing but this all forms the integrity constraint. So, in this unit, we will be discussing what are the different types of keys and how it is related. After that, we will be going to the views. In general, what is the view, how it is related to the database. Whenever you are creating the view, after creating, how you delete the view or destroy the view, and if you want to make any changes in the table using the concept of views, you will be using. Then comes the concept of relational algebra. Now, whenever we are studying relational algebra, we only study in terms of theoretical. We don't implement in practical way. That is nothing but whenever we are writing the queries, we write in a practical way, but relational algebra we only study in the theoretical way. So the relational algebra is divided into two types, that is nothing but tuple relational calculus and domain relational calculus. But the main thing we need to remember is nothing but we study theoretically, we don't write any queries using the relational algebra. So by the second unit end, you will be knowing what are the integrity constraints, what are the different types of keys we are using, and how that keys are useful in the tables in which we are creating. So this is nothing but an introduction to the relational model. Now in the third unit, we will be discussing about the SQL. SQL is nothing but an structured query language. That is, what is the use of structured query language? Now, whenever we study about the DBMS, it is not about theory. We should also know how to write a query. Query is nothing but it is a question. Now, let us assume I give a table, student table, in which it includes student ID, student name, student address and student mobile number. Now, let us take the example of second year students, second year CSCG students. There what I will be doing, I will be storing all the information of second CSCG in database. Right. So, whenever I am storing the information, if I want to retrieve one student information, then we will be using the concept of queries. In these queries, whenever we are writing the queries, we will be using the constraints. Previously, I discussed constraints are nothing but about the primary key and the foreign key. And also, we have a new concept called triggers. In that, we will see how the query looks, what is the basic form of the query. In that we perform different operations like union, intersect and except. And also you have nested queries. Nested queries are nothing but queries within a query. You write one query, within that you will be writing another query. This is nothing but inner query and this is nothing but the outer query. And we will be dealing about different aggregation operations, that as such as sum, minimum, maximum. There are 5 aggregation operators: sum, minimum, maximum, total. Okay, null values, all this will be discussing. Now coming to the third unit B part is nothing but schema refinement. What is exactly the schema refinement? Means when there is a duplicacy of data. Now in a table, let us assume students may have the same name. In that case, what we are doing, how we are going to reduce the redundancy, and also we use the decomposition. And also we need to know what are functional dependency, what is the reason behind learning the normalizations. We will be having 5 normal forms, but in our syllabus we will be studying only first, second, third and BCNF normal form. So this is the overview. So when we enter the third unit, we will be having a grip on how to write a queries, how you declare a primary key, foreign key, what is a nested queries, what are the different aggregation operators, and also if the data is duplicacy of data exists in table, we use the redundancy to solve that table. This is about the schema refinement. Now coming to the fourth unit, transaction concept. Now in the transaction concept, we basically study about the acid properties. A stands for atomicity, C stands for consistency, I stands for isolation and D stands for durability. So we will be studying all these 4 properties and how it is useful in our table, right? So that is the reason we call this acid properties as transaction concept. And how we are implementing, as we have already discussed the acid properties, we will be checking how we implement the atomicity and durability, and how also the executions are done concurrently. At a single time you can perform more than one operations. In the concurrent execution you will be having 2 operations, read and write. So these 2 operations will be checking how we are performing the operations continuously. and also will be discussing about serializability, recoverability, and how you test the serializability. And this unit, log based protocol is very important. Two phase locking protocol that we'll discuss in detail, and also time step based protocol, it is validation based protocols. These are nothing but different types of protocols which we'll be discussing how to overcome the disadvantages of the serializability and how we test this. And also we'll be discussing about the recovery with concurrent transactions, means at a time if you want to perform more than one read operation and one write operation, how we are performing using the recovery one. So this is about the fourth unit. Now in the fifth unit, we are completely concentrating on the concept of file, that is how the data is stored on the external desired storage using the concept of file organization and indexing. You will be having different types of indexing. The major type of indexing is nothing but cluster. The next one is primary, secondary. Next, index data structures, hash based, tree based, and before that, after discussing all this indexing, we will be checking the comparisons of the different types of indexing. And in this unit, this is very important. Indexed sequential access method, you will be having different types of trees called B plus trees and also B minus trees, that we will be discussing detail in the syllabus. But at the fifth unit, we will be only concentrating how the files are stored on the external storage and what are the different types of indexing that we are checking, and how we compare this indexing using the indexed sequential access method. We will be concentrating on B plus and B minus tree. So these are the 5 units that we will be discussing about in DBMS. What are the topics, what are the subtopics that are involved? Now we'll be seeing the textbooks and the reference books. For the database management system concept, the textbook we need to follow is nothing but McGraw-Hill, and that to the 3rd edition. In this edition, what happens is they cover the minimum concepts, the exact definition, that is what is SQL, what do you mean by query. Now query means in DBMS terms it's a question, but they'll tell you what is the exact meaning of query. And the next one is nothing but Raghu Ramakrishna. This is an Indian author. This book is preferably prescribed textbook for the database management system. It will be covering a single concept of everything. Even we don't know some terminologies such as schema, refinement, decomposition, they'll be providing a simple definitions in a simple language in which we can understand. And these are the references books: Database System Design, Implementation Management by Peter Robb and Carlos Cornell, and Fundamental of Database Management System. But preferably I would prefer the students to take Raghu Ramakrishna, as it is in a simple English language and will be able to understand everything in detail. These are the 2 prescribed rules. From this would be more preferable compared to the first one. We can prefer these 2 textbooks, but this would be more good as all the concepts are covered in simple English terminology. Now already we have discussed all the 5 units, and we already know what are the 5 units main heading and also the subheadings. Now after the students have finished the exact 5 units, we should know what they have achieved from learning the database management system. So here we have 4 course outcomes. I'll tell you in the first course outcome what we do. The student will be able to know the knowledge of fundamentals of DBMS, database design and normal forms. What do you mean by fundamentals of data management system? Is nothing but how the data is stored in the database. How the data is stored in the database. This is very important. Fundamentals are nothing but student will be knowing how the data is stored in the database. In database, the data will be stored in the forms of tables, that is in the forms of rows and columns. So student will be knowing how the data is storing, what is the table. Let us assume student is a table. Here we will be taking all the details, SID, S name, S address. So here in this way the data is stored. And also database design, that is how the design of the database is done, and also the normal forms. The normal forms are very important. In the normal forms we will see what are the normal forms, how it is decomposed further for the first solutions. This is about the course outcome 1. Next, coming to the course outcomes 2. After studying the second unit, the student will be able to know about master the basics of SQL for retrieval and management of data. What do you mean by retrieval and manage? Now I already created a database for student with these details, SID, SNAME, address. Now what I want to do, I want to find the information of SID student 1. For this what I'll use? I'll retrieve the data. How I'll retrieve the data? By using the simple queries. So after reading second unit, students will be able to write queries for retrieving the data, for inserting the information, for deleting. So after the second unit, student will have grip on writing the queries and making the modifications to the database by adding a new information, deleting the information, and also managing the complete information. Next, course outcome 3. Here, as we have discussed the transactions property, that is acid properties, atomicity, consistency, implementation, isolation, durability. So atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability. We will be knowing what are these 4 things and what we will be achieving by acquiring these properties. Now the last one is course outcome 4. Here we will be knowing about the database storage structures, that is how we are familiar, how the data is stored in the terms of file. That is, I told you, we'll be discussing about the different file structures, and also we'll be comparing about hash based, index sequential access method, B plus trees and B minus trees. This all will be knowing how we are accessing the data and how the data is stored in the files. So after the student finish reading the entire 5 units, they will be able to know all the complete curriculum of this structure. Thank you.